The stable rollout of Android 16 is here for Pixel devices. Apple announced iOS Liquid Glass. iOS Windows Vista? iOS 26. That's the one. Also launched with a very stupid Circle to Search ripoff. And an Android smartphone maker is claiming it will be the first to allow an Apple Watch to connect to an Android phone. Somehow. I'm C. Scott Brown, and it's time for a quick roundup of the biggest tech news that you need to know about. By far, the biggest tech news this week for us folks who love Android is the stable rollout of Android 16 for Pixel devices. This is the earliest rollout of a stable Android launch in well over a decade. Usually, we would see it in the fall, but we are not even officially in the summer yet, and Android 16 is already on millions of devices. Unfortunately, Android 16 does not yet have the biggest and most anticipated update, which is Material 3 Expressive. This is the new design overhaul Google showed off a few weeks ago that brings a fresh new look to all sorts of Android staples, such as the icons in the status bar, the quick tiles, and even the background of the app drawer, which now has a sweet blurred effect so you can continue to see your wallpaper behind it. No, all those cool new things are not in Android 16 yet, but they will be here soon. Probably in the fall, I would guess. And I know you're super excited about it, but the upcoming desktop mode is also not in Android 16. So what is in Android 16 then? What Google has basically done here is bring over the groundwork for a lot of new features that are coming very soon. For example, Android 16 will eventually have a feature called Live Updates. This was stolen from the iPhone. Yeah, that's right. I just said that.
It's true.
Anyway, Live Updates will show persistent notifications that update you on the progress of something happening in the background. For example, an Uber Eats order could be on its way to you. Instead of needing to open the Uber Eats app over and over to check on when your food will be dropped off, there will be a notification that will show you its progress. This will be awesome and will work across all sorts of apps and services. But remember, Live Updates is not actually in the stable rollout of Android 16, but the background system that makes it work is there. So now we just need to wait until Google rolls out the rest of it. Another thing in Android 16 is mandatory implementations of design changes Google made years ago. For example, edge-to-edge app design arrived as an optional thing for developers with Android 10 a long time ago, but it's now mandatory. This means developers must make their apps use the entire display of the device. They can no longer hide some of the app behind the status bar at the top of the display or the navigation bar at the bottom. There are a few other examples of this in Android 16, like with the predictive back gesture and app adaptivity. That last one is a big deal because it will mean apps must adapt to large displays, which means no more smartphone-shaped apps on huge tablets and foldable displays. There's one other major Android 16 feature, which is called Advanced Protection. This is exactly what it sounds like, a system-wide security mode that beefs up your phone's defenses against all manners of malicious attacks. This one is great because it's basically a one-tap solution. You turn it on and boom, you're protected. My buddy Paul covers all this stuff in more detail in our Android 16 launch roundup video, which I'll link to up here. He also goes over a lot of the features that we know are coming later this year, many of which are way more exciting than what was actually launched this week. But don't rush off to watch it just yet though. I still have 2 more stories to tell you about. Seriously, wait until I finish. It's just the polite thing to do. Anyway, Google wasn't the only company to launch a major software upgrade this week. A small company that you might have heard of, named after a fruit, launched something called iOS 26. If you're confused because the most recent version of iOS was iOS 18, that's because Apple changed the name of iOS to match up with the year it's released in, which makes sense because this is 2026. That's right. This was recorded in the future.
Welcome to the future!
Okay, so iOS 26 is a confusing name, but whatever. What people have really been talking about is
Liquid Glass,
which is the new design language for the operating system. It basically makes all the elements of the OS clear so you can see through icons and notifications. People who are old enough to remember were quick to note that this looks a lot like Windows Vista, which launched in 2007. Not me though, I don't remember Windows Vista. I'm not old enough. I'm certainly not old enough to remember the launch of Windows XP. Liar! Anyway, what I want to talk about here is one segment we saw during the iOS 26 announcement. In this clip, Apple showed off what is clearly a clone of Google's Circle to Search feature, which came out a year ago. What's notable about Apple's version of Circle to Search, though, is that it clearly is terrible. Watch how this guy uses it to search for a jacket. Notice anything weird about the search results? None of them have the jacket he's looking for in them. The same thing happens later when he looks for this bizarre lamp that looks like a mushroom. None of the results he gets are for the lamp he was searching for. I don't know about you, but when I use Circle to Search, I actually get the results for the thing I've circled, not for something that vaguely looks like that thing if you squint real hard and forget about objective reality. Of course, this is a new feature that's currently in a developer beta, so I shouldn't be too hard on Apple about it. Sometimes it takes them a while to catch up, so we'll just let them do their thing. Good luck, guys. The final story today came out of nowhere earlier this week. A product manager at Chinese smartphone company Vivo posted to social media claiming that the upcoming Vivo X Fold 5 will be the first Android smartphone to support connectivity to an Apple Watch. Yeah, for real. So, you might not know about this, but we learned pretty recently that Apple originally wanted the Apple Watch to work with Android phones as well as iPhones. However, it abandoned that idea for the reason you're expecting, because it wouldn't lock people into the Apple ecosystem enough. That's why even today the Apple Watch only works with an iPhone. So now we have Vivo saying they figured out a way to make an Android phone bypass this restriction. Unfortunately, Vivo doesn't explain how it's going to work. As far as we know, there's no way it could do this that wouldn't involve some sort of clunky workaround. For example, it could be that your Vivo X Fold 5 could get information from your Apple Watch, but only if there's an iPhone in the middle to relay that information. It could be that there's a macOS computer in the middle and a virtual iPhone or something like that. Whatever it is, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as easy as just connecting an Apple Watch to an Android phone, because Apple would shut that down faster than you can say, "It's called a walled garden for a reason, Vivo." Shut it down! Either way, we'll find out soon enough, as the Vivo X Fold 5 should launch in just a few weeks. That's it for this roundup. If you want to dive deeper into these stories, I have included links below to the original sources on these topics. Remember to like and subscribe so you'll be notified as soon as the next roundup goes live. See you all soon.